CyberArk is at the forefront of demonstrating how identity security can help prevent and block a ransomware infection before it brings a business down. CyberArk offers protection along every aspect of the attack chain, from the initial intrusion all the way through data exfiltration. Whether you are proactively building your security program or need to restore trust in your IT environment, CyberArk has the experience to help. Learn how at securityweekly.com/CyberArk.
Picture your team being able to map out the external attack surface as it grows and see the same attack vectors as a hacker does. Most tools out there do asset discovery, but stop there. Enter Detectify. It takes an inventory of exposed web assets and automates vulnerability testing for security misconfigurations, expiring subdomains, and risks in third-party software. Here's the cool part. They crowdsource payloads from leading ethical hackers. It finds bugs you actually want to fix and finds them in time. Start a free 2-week trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Detectify. Go hack yourself. Attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with ExtraHop network detection and response, and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how ExtraHop stops them with a live attack simulation. Register at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to any of our podcast feeds and have all new episodes downloaded right to your phone. You can also join our mailing list, our Discord server, and follow us on social media and our streaming platforms. All right, and today, for our second interview, Ian Glazer joins us today to talk about Salesforce's journey towards complete customer MFA. We actually talked about this story during one of our news segments back when there was some press on it, because it was a pretty big deal for a big enterprise SaaS operation to enforce MFA across all customers, or at least we felt like it was. So we discussed it back then. So it's great to have Ian here today. He's the Senior VP for Identity Product Management at Salesforce. He leads the product management team, product strategy, and the identity standards work there. He's also the co-founder of ID Pro, which I wasn't aware of before researching for this interview, not to be confused with IDA Pro, which is a membership organization that provides training, certifications, and other services around identity stuff. He's also a noted blogger, speaker, and SOC photographer. Welcome to the show, Ian.
This is the danger when you don't, fully get all the way to the bottom of the bio. You submit these things for like speaking gigs, and they're like, "Wait, what?" I just slid that sentence in there. I take pictures of my socks. It's a long story.
I look for the canaries in the bios. I look. Sometimes I go outside the bios and I do my own research.
There you go.
So if I'm interviewing you, you never know. I'll dig stuff up.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, and actually, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how I found you, which was looking through the roster of talks at Identiverse. I picked out some of the ones that looked the most interesting to me, and this was one of them. So I believe you're speaking about this at Identiverse that's mid-June. Is that correct? June, like 22nd through 24th, something like that?
That sounds about right.
And this is more or less the name of the talk, right? What we're talking about today. It's about that journey.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to be talking about some of the things that me and my team learned as we progressed along this path towards rolling out customer MFA. And because there's a lot of things that, whether you are also a SaaS provider and want to do this, or you're just an identity practitioner in your own enterprise and you've got the big thing, whether it's a governance rollout or it's an MFA rollout or an SSO rollout, I think there's things that we learn in the process that everyone can take from. And so I wanted to share some of our experiences.
Yeah. And, rolling out MFA across a large enterprise is one thing, but rolling it out across an enterprise SaaS the size of Salesforce, like I'm not sure I even have a good handle on how big Salesforce's customer base is. Can you give me some idea of just the size of this task?
Sure. So you're absolutely right. Like enterprise rollout of MFA is kind of akin to changing a menu item in the cafeteria, right? Like you can do that and that's going to be fine. You want to go do this for your customer base, that's a whole different ballgame. So we have over 150,000 customers. And so many of them have multiple tenants with us. So that meant rolling this out across all of our lines of business, what we call clouds, about 10 of them, all of the tenants, all of the users that are logging in and interacting with the applications. And that's a hefty undertaking, especially because not all of our clouds had the same MFA capabilities to begin with. So the early part of our program was really about coming up with feature parity. That meant deploying a shared service that they could all use. And then was about rolling out the adoption of MFA to customers, both sort of proactively saying, hey, look, by February 1, 2022, you're going to be contractually obligated to use MFA under these conditions. And then starting to roll out more and more automated enforcement. And that's really where we sit today, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself.
So I have a follow-up question. It's one thing, as Adrian hinted at, to roll out MFA, 2FA, whatever we want to call it, at an enterprise for an enterprise-wide company, even for like a massively huge project internal for an internal enterprise. There's somewhat less risk than rolling it out as a vendor. And what I mean by that is if you screw it up as an enterprise, you can mandate your employees use it. They can push back all they want. You can say, tough, you're using it. If you're mandated as a vendor to your customers, they can always say, hey, we're just not going to use you anymore. We're going to go to a competitor. We're going to do something different because the friction's too high, or whatever garbage excuse that we all know is a bad excuse. But I'm sure you ran into those. My two questions are, did you see a lot of resistance from an excuse perspective, number one? And number two is, how did you get it past this top senior executive team to take that added vendor risk of potentially losing revenue?
So let me answer those in reverse order. This mandate, this rollout of MFA started from the top. Our CISO, in conjunction with our two CEOs, our co-CEOs, really said, we're going to do this. And essentially, they likened it to saying, look, it's time for everybody to put on their seatbelts, right? Putting on your seatbelt in a car, it's not something we argue about. You do that. And our co-CEOs are willing to say publicly, hey, it's time for everyone to put on their seatbelts. So we had that strong tone at the top and that support to say, this is the right thing to do because there are things that any vendor can do, Salesforce can do to protect its customers. And there are things that uniquely customers can do to protect themselves. Adoption of MFA is an unusual one in that it's one where it's shared, right? We provide those capabilities, customer needs to adopt those things, and it's actually the best shared way that we collectively can protect our customers and their customers' data. And so that was the thought process, and it came really from the top. Now, the resistance part of it, I'll tell you that we had the opposite in a lot of cases. We had CISOs coming to us and being like, oh, thank God, you gave me an excuse to go bigger with MFA. And I've been wanting to do it, but I hadn't found the vehicle to doing it. And so I could actually use your mandate, your requirement of using MFA to start rolling MFA out internally in the enterprise to more places. Now, let me be clear. We definitely hit use cases that were more difficult than others. A good example is UX test suites and robotic process automation. From our perspective, those just look like good old UX logins, right? Those are normal users from pretty much all perspectives. They were still subject to the MFA requirement. And this is a place where we had to look at those use cases. We had to look at what was viable in terms of like what was technically possible. In some cases, we've given people extensions. In some cases, we've said, look, there are certain use cases that are really, really challenging because there is no technology, whether we possess it or someone else, that's going to meet the need. We'll keep looking. In the meantime, here's other things we suggest you do to protect this specific account in this specific use case. And I think this just comes from a willingness to meet the customers where they are with some empathy of, hey, look, for the vast majority of cases, we can do this. May not be the first thing that was on your mind when you started this program, but you can do it and you should. And then there are going to be those tough use cases and we'll work together with you on them.
So you said it came from the top, the mandate to do this. Do you have a good sense for why that was? What the reasoning was?
I don't know all the specifics. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but I do know that we had been seeing, and we're not unique in this regard, such an increase in credential stuffing attacks, in seeing the kinds of incidents where a second factor in MFA would have prevented an incident. And we're saying, we're looking across us, we're looking at across the whole industry. We're saying, like, look, this is in some sense, from a security perspective, a low-hanging fruit, right? This is the simplest control that can be deployed that has the most impact. Let's push for it. So I think it was really a combination of those factors that we looked at and said, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, and now, really getting to how you would do it, because Salesforce has had MFA for a long, long time.
Yep.
So was this more the logistics of how to roll it out to customers and enforce it, or was there a bunch of work that you had to do to kind of enhance and improve the actual MFA feature set, to make it robust enough for to answer address all the nooks and crannies of how people would want to do it? Because I imagine some folks were doing it just via SAML, via SSO already, using a different identity provider like an Okta or something like that, right?
It's a little of both, actually. Partially, it had to do with our different business units, our clouds. Not all of the clouds had the same MFA capabilities. Now, this is natural in an organization that's grown through acquisition as well as sort of organic growth. So we had an uneven feature playing field. We knew we needed to level that, if only because we wanted to offer as consistent guidance to our customers as possible and try to cut down on well, if you use this product, then on Tuesdays it works like this, and on this product it works like this on Wednesdays, right? So we wanted to eliminate that and make it as clear as possible. So there was a part of this effort that was consolidating our clouds onto a single MFA service that we were building, that we had built. The other part of this was, as you say, expanding our feature set. So the big thing that we wanted to make sure we were going to put in the hands of our customers was as many authentication modalities as was practical. We had made some decisions that email OTP, SMS OTP were not going to be allowed. That met with a strong set of opinions from some people. But we said, look, things like TOTP, push-based mobile app, and then the big one was adding WebAuthn. Both the platform support and the hardware key, the roaming support, were really things that we wanted to up-level, give people more choice in what they were doing. So it was a little of both to do this. But to your point, we had a lot of customers who were authenticating to Salesforce, and they were doing SSO. And the requirement is also, when they do SSO, they need to do MFA along with it. And we had conversations with our customers about that. So we did some things to add monitoring there. In the standards like SAML, you can actually see, assuming the IDP sends it, what happened upstream. How did that user authenticate? Same thing with OpenID Connect. So we've been adding tooling around that as well. So a mix of feature parity, new features, and then wanting to really push this out to customers to give them the most kinds of choice in terms of how they can meet the requirements.
And now, so when did all this start? Give me an idea of the timeline. Like how long does it take to take, something like Salesforce, from execs saying, hey, let's go ahead and rip this Band-Aid off and just get this done, to actually getting most of customers, let's say, moved over? Yeah.
So the precursor kind of is the spring, summer of 2019. The program really kicked off in the fall of 2019. Our first customer communications about the deadlines were in April of 2020. The only reason why I know these dates is because on my other window, I'm literally working on my keynotes. I'm like, when did I do that? Like, I had to go back and check. So those are fresh in my head. We set a date of February 1, 2022 for the mandate to take effect. Essentially, on that day, our customers are contractually obligated to use MFA or SSO with MFA. What's happened between that sort of fall 19, and now has been, as I mentioned, some of it is customer adoption, internal customer, right? Getting service parity. And the rest has been focused on awareness, outreach, materials to guide people on how to enable it for their products. And where we find ourselves today is we're doing really well. Do we have 100%? No, we don't. But that's okay. We have an amazing growth on this and have been really driving towards seeing that complete customer adoption. What we noticed, however, is we've got over 150,000 customers, and we actually did call downs. We called admins. We tried to reach them where they were. But we do have a long tail of customers that haven't taken all the steps they need to enable MFA. And what we're doing now is adding more automation to start turning this on more proactively. So up until roughly February this year, it's been a customer has chosen, I'm going to turn this on, or I'm going to turn on SSO. And now what you'll be seeing from Salesforce for this year going forward is more automation, saying, okay, net new tenants, for example, are going to have MFA on by default, unless you're doing SSO, and you can't turn that off. And you'll start to see that across more and more of our products as the year continues.
So a few follow-up questions there. First of all, what were the customer reactions like, when you made this decision? Like, I imagine in some organizations, like, trying to, like what Tyler was talking about, trying to get, and you as well, for folks waving the MFA banner, not getting support from higher up. I imagine at least some of your customers, that this was great news for them because they don't have to fight that fight anymore. They can just point to Salesforce and say, look, it's mandated now. We got to do it.
So they do that, right? I think overwhelmingly what we hear from our customers is they want to keep their customer data safe, right? And they're willing to do more to do that. So overall, we found people were very, very positive about this. We also got a lot of people saying like, hey, welcome to the party. We've already been doing it. Great. Excellent. And then there was a group of folks, I would say, who said, I want to do this. I see how this is going to be powerful and helpful for me to protect myself and my customers. But I either have a particular use case or I have interesting constraints because of policy that may make this challenging. Can you meet me where I am? Can you help me through this process? So we absolutely had those two, and we worked with them in some cases on a very individual level to help them through that process. But it comes back to, for me, that shared acknowledgement that, hey, customer, we're in the rowboat together here, right? And it's small, and we're trying to protect your customers' data and your data. And some things we can do ourselves, some things you can do yourself, and there's some things that are in the middle that are shared. And this is one of them. And that message really resonated with them.
And one of my follow-up questions was, how do you mandate this if you can't? Well, I guess the better question is, can you see if somebody's upstream using MFA? I would assume you can't. Like with SAML v2, you just assign a different authentication provider, and you can't necessarily see if they've got MFA enabled at that level, right? Like you just have to trust that the customer's doing the right thing there.
It's a combination. You can. In the standards themselves, in SAML, you have something called the authn context. In OpenID Connect, you have something called AMR claims that should give you a window into what's happening upstream. How did that user authenticate at the IDP? What we are seeing is that data is not consistently populated. So whether it's there or not is not consistent. And the values that we get there, although they are, in the case of, let's say, OpenID Connect, laid out in the standard, how they're used and they're meeting the semantics around them, well, that there's no interpreting. So we'll get, and I'll talk a little bit about this in the talk in a couple of weeks, we'll get these strings of abbreviations of like PWD, okay, I assume that was a password, comma, OTP. I'm like, okay, so does that mean that they got a password challenge and a one-time password challenge? Okay, cool. But then we see a lot of random things which are a little less decipherable. So this isn't the sexy part of standards by any stretch of the imagination, but this is one of those things that large IDPs and IDP vendors, identity provider vendors, it would be great if they started making this a default configuration, right? Starting to send that signal is really powerful. So we are asking our customers, this is what it means, and we expect that you're doing it. We know that people's IDP deployments don't necessarily provide that information. So it makes the trust and verify model a little bit challenging. But this is where I think the industry can actually rise up and help all of us, is just provide that signal more in a default manner and standardize the way and the semantics we express what happened upstream.
So it seems like some improvements could make it more automatic and less of like an honor system. It sounds like it's a bit of an honor system type of situation today.
The way I want to start is this. I want the visibility upstream first, right? Because I just want to know, roughly speaking, across the customer base, like, what do we see percentage-wise, right? Is it vast majority of people who are using SSO? Do we have a value or not? Then we can start to be a little bit more detailed about what actions we want to take. What I don't want to do, what I'll be extremely hesitant to do, is turn on any form of automated enforcement if we don't find values, because we know the IDPs aren't sending this information. So there still is a component that we're saying, customer, you're obligated to do this. We don't see that information for right now. We're trusting that you're doing it, but you are obligated to do it. And then over time, we will add more and more automation to it. And if I can poke and prod some of my peers in other places to help by default provide this information, we're going to do that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Ian. Thanks for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
And Ian's talk will be at Identiverse, which is in Denver, Colorado. I was close when I was trying to remember the dates off the top of my head. It is June 21st through 24th in Denver, Colorado. Early rates now available. The website says, and his talk is on Tuesday, June 21st at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. All right. And stick around with us. We'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.